All right.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Rios, for being here and being willing to do this interview with me this morning. Just to introduce myself, I'm Ryan Autenrieth. I'm co-owner of A Seat at the Table Books right here in Elk Grove near Sacramento. And recently, we just did a live book talk specifically about your book, Punished, Policing the Lives of Black and Latino Boys. And wow, it was a powerful discussion, and your book and research and story has always inspired me. And I'll be honest, I'm an educator myself, so it's also inspired my students. And when I reached out to you originally, I was like, it's just a hope and a prayer. I didn't think you would respond, but wow, you got back to us and are willing to do this interview. So just want to thank you again from the bottom of my heart. But also want to give you a chance to introduce yourself to the audience, because there might be some people watching or listening who may not know too much about you yet, and your story and research and job and background. So I just want to give you a minute to share a little bit about yourself, Dr. Rios, and thank you again for being here.
Oh man, Ryan, it's an honor. I support, small businesses, small bookstores. I'm glad that you had that conversation. Thank you for having that conversation. For the audience, yeah, my name is Victor Rios. I never thought I would author a book. I was practically illiterate. As a high school kid, I was a dropout, a juvenile delinquent, in and out of juvie, on the streets. Grew up where there were moments where, the family was homeless, sleeping under trees at the park in Oakland, California, where, my family is from, or at least that's where we, were raised. And then my mom, I was actually born in Mexico, but I was brought out here when I was little, like a couple years old, with my brother, my mom. We came out here to the U.S., to Oakland in particular. But all to say that, a lot of life of struggle. And then we just end up, in situations of survival, committing crimes of survival, at least I did. And then got caught up in the street life. Yeah, it's a tough journey. And then a teacher stepped into my life junior year of high school. And she was like, look, Victor, you got to help your family. You got to help your community. She understood like familial culture. She understood how to be culturally responsive to her students. I thought I was going to end up dead or in prison by the time I turned 18. But this teacher really, kind of turned my mindset around and helped me out. Her name was Miss Flora Russ. So she sends me off to graduate, helped me out with that, hooked me up with some mentors. They started to challenge me. They started to inspire me. And then I end up applying to college. I get to college, and kind of the rest is history, man. I just end up going to get a doctorate degree. And I'm like, man, I want to study the same kids that I come from, that community I come from. And so we, get through grad school, really trying to understand these young people. And that's how that book, Punished, was created.
Wow. Well, thank you again for being here and, speaking your truth. And I'll just say from personal experience, your story really has inspired other people, people you've never met. So just know, it has ripple effects, all the work you're doing. I did want to ask you, and this comes from our book group too. We really enjoyed reading Punish, and I say enjoyed with like quotations because, of course, it really does a great job outlining a lot of the problems and challenges of, using the term youth control complex and negative experiences and being targeted in a negative way by, police and school and other institutions. But we were really curious and inspired by the concept of creating something opposite of that, a youth support complex. I know you use that term. And I guess we were curious, and I think the audience would be curious to hear more, like, what does youth support complex mean to you? And what do you feel like that looks like out in the real world?
Well, youth support complex for me looks like opportunities for young people that don't have opportunities. Like, let's think of middle class kids, like my kids are middle class. Like right now, one of them, he's complaining because he has to go all these summer camps, man. I'm like, I get mad, I get jealous. I'm like, hey, man, I never got to go to summer camp as a kid. Stop complaining. He gets to go to the beach, and then he gets to camp in the mountains. He gets to do baseball and play lacrosse. And I'm like, man, you got a good life. And he's like, I don't want to go to summer camp.
Yeah.
And those are opportunities where these middle class kids learn how to be amongst each other, healthy conflict resolution, healthy friendships that last forever.
Mhm.
Whereas poor kids like myself and others, they don't get that supervision. They don't get those camp counselors. They don't get those experiences. And they're kind of just out there, parents working, maybe they're essential workers, and they're just out there at home all day or in the community all day. And, there's some predators out there, some adults in the community that really take advantage of children sometimes. And so it's important for us to always have proper supervision of our children in our society as if they were middle class kids. When you're in the middle class, sometimes you can afford to leave work and go check on your kid. Sometimes you can afford to pay for a counselor or a camp for your kid to be in. And so as a society, we have to invest, right, in children from poor backgrounds to have these kinds of experiences, particularly in the summertime when they pretty practically get abandoned. And it's a trip though, because in our society, we do invest in supervision of children of color or poor children. But that supervision we invest in is policing, right? So we invest a lot of money in police so they can supervise children, and then they end up getting in trouble and in a conflict with each other. And that's how you see the school to prison pipeline become a issue in our society. Also, of course, police harassment, police killings of unarmed children of color. In Chicago's, a couple 13, 15-year-old Latinx boys, and across the country, other young man of color, Black young man that being killed by police. Why? That supervision isn't there. Like we need that supervision. And the way we provide it is by investing in counselors, in camps, in support groups, and support programs, and success coaches and mentors, like the people that mentored me to go to college. And providing those services. It's an investment that society has to make. I think it could be fit into like the human infrastructure kind of agenda that Joe Biden's been talking about, because that's what we're investing in, right? The infrastructure of a future generation, and that's the youth support complex.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I mean, that gives us something concrete, right? Because we're like, I think a lot of us, whether we know about the problems or we're just learning about them, it's like we want to know what we can do. But clearly, investment and there needs to be some financial backing to provide these programs. And like you said, programs that aren't, run by the police or probation department, but maybe run by schools or positive community centers, and getting those types of people more invested in our youth. I think, wow, that would be amazing. I also hear this question, come out, and maybe it's a little bit, more on the individual level of an educator or a parent or someone who just cares. And they're saying, okay, I see all these problems, systemic problems, and it's frustrating, and obviously they're angered and they're desperate to want to change things. And I think the question comes up as an individual, as an educator, a parent, or someone who just cares, what can you do on the individual level? Obviously on
Mhm.
the systems level, we need more support, financial funding, policies, programs. But on the individual level as well, where do you feel like needs to change in that realm?
Well, for me, it was individuals that made a difference. It was a teacher that cared, and that other teachers saw me as a problem, as a thug. She saw me as having potential. She saw me 20 years later. What is Victor, who right now is a gangster and a dropout? What can he be? She saw the author. She saw the TED Talk speaker. She saw the guy that went to advise the Obama administration on gun violence and policing before it had even ever happened. She saw that 20 years ahead because she was projecting for her students a future that they couldn't even begin to imagine. And that's what we got to do as educators and as individuals out in society, you know, voting for the right people that are wanting to invest in human infrastructure, wanting to invest in poor communities, and also getting involved. I gathered a team of volunteer professionals that some of them had never worked with kids. We went into the community of Watts in LA, and we mentored a bunch of young people out there. And it was amazing because you get to connect them with your networks if you have networks in your professional world. And that's what happened. And a lot of these kids went back to school, finished their degrees, went on to get decent jobs, all because they had adults that networked them and connected them to the right resources. So check out the film. It's called The Pushouts. And you could go to thepushouts.com and see what we did. There's a documentary that aired on PBS that shows that project I just mentioned.
Oh, that's awesome. And we'll for sure get that link out there as well. I think more people could see visually what it looks like and see the work you've done. I think that's inspiring, right? And it takes the research to practice, which I think you're big about, you know, because you do the research, but I could tell you believe in transformative change and you're trying to, you know, change things as well. So I really appreciate that. I think another question
Thank
we
you.
had is about getting more young people involved in the decision-making process. So I often see and hear, you know, maybe some good, well-intentioned adults are getting together and they're maybe using research and they're trying to brainstorm the future. What can we change in education, policing, in our community to make the system, make the situation better? But sometimes the people I see absent are the young people who it will affect. So, what do you have any suggestions relating to involving young people in these conversations and the decision-making process?
Absolutely. I always get that question from like superintendents, principals, mayors, the police chiefs. They're like, oh, yeah, we want to get a perspective from the youth. How do we do it? I'm like, you'll bring them to the table, man. That's all you got to
Right.
do. But our institutions are not equipped. They weren't designed to bring children's voices, young people's voices to the table. So because we are doing business as usual, or conference rooms or Zoom calls, where we're handling business and creating policy, we usually don't have young people at the table. And, it's because we belittle kind of young people in our society, well, yeah, they're going to be irrational. Oh, they don't have the right. But we have to for sure include them in big decision-making tables, big decision-making meetings, policy making, any and all of that. And even in schools, like when there's even in, and people bring up privacy issues sometimes. Oh, these children, their peers are going through stuff, they're seeing the privacy stuff. So we got to figure out how to make it to where they could still participate, um, and we address the privacy issues sometimes that we bring up. But all to say that there's school districts that have invited me that actually are doing the right thing. They're just one example I remember is actually a county office of education, Santa Clara County Office of Education, when they had me train their entire, educators, classified and certified staff. It was really cool because they actually brought a 1 hour panel of young people to talk to um, uh, stakeholders, to talk to educators. And I facilitated that. I remember also in the Sacramento area, Woodland Unified School District, they also brought a panel of youth, and I facilitated that. And then educators, principals, superintendents, they could hear what the kids had to say. Yeah, you need to invest time and curate that conversation. Of course, you need to, prep the youth, and of course, not prep them like give them what to say, but hear what they have to say, plot it out, scatter it out on the wall somewhere, on some note paper somewhere, and then show them, look, this is what you all are talking about. I'm seeing a theme here. What do you want to do? And then they'll say something like, oh, yeah, we want to talk about this. This is, safety. We're not feeling safe. You talk to children right now, their number one thing is we don't feel safe, which is surprising to me because I wouldn't think that be their number one concern, but you talk to them, we don't feel safe. Oh, what do you mean by that? Oh, when we get to school or through the community, you get to school, we got, our peers messing with us, bullying us. When we get to school, we got teachers questioning us or even criminalizing us. So sometimes we don't feel safe with the security process at school. When there's an officer, we don't know if the officer is going to harass us or that officer is going to be nice to us. We don't feel safe, right? So feeling safe is such an important thing right now for young people, and that came from our research collecting, data from focus groups with them, right? But that wasn't my first. Like, if you were to ask me to guess, what's their first concern? I would probably think, oh, financial stability. Yeah, that's a concern too. But first, they need to feel safe.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think that's super helpful because I think a lot of people are wondering how to bring more youth in the conversation. And if that's probably not unanimous, I don't know if everyone even agrees with that, but especially for the youth who are most affected, I think your book speaks to it, where you if you give an outlet for someone, it could be empowering. So this might be the youth who've been most punished or targeted or criminalized that you actually want to bring to the table. Because if you're just speaking to the youth who are never bothered, never targeted, the most outgoing students of the group are already in leadership, I don't know. Like, I don't feel like you're then speaking to the audience you need to. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah. I mean, you know what happens when you bring one demographic of students in is that they have one perspective on life and what schools have been like, right? Oh, like we always, there's a book we wrote. It's called "My Teacher Believes in Me,"
Mhm.
and it's a pun on one survey we did with kids where we're asking them, you know, to rank from 1 to 5, how much they agree with that question or that phrase. My teacher believes in me, or my teacher cares about people like me. And so sometimes if you ask a demographic of students, the high achievers, they might say, yeah, my teacher cares about me. Well, if you're a high achiever, the research shows teachers across the board are likely to treat you well. If you're a low achiever, across the board, not all teachers, but you are likely to report that your teachers don't care about you. Now the debate is there whether it's because you have this personality trait that you can't get along with teachers, and so of course you feel that teachers don't care about you, or whether it's a structural thing where teachers are set up in the education system we operate in to not care, or at least show that they don't care, even in implicit ways, about children that are struggling. And this is a trip. You've been in the classroom, right? You know what's up, man. It's like you got 30 kids, you got 150 kids throughout the day if you're a high school teacher, and you care, but then the system burns you out because it's expecting you to,
Right.
teach to the test. It's expecting you to meet standards. Oh, we lost a year, learning loss during COVID, learning loss, get to the academic. And instead of learning loss, it should be emotional gain. Like, what did these children gain, and how we could push up their emotional potential? Because when you teach the heart, the mind will follow.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll ask kind of my last question, and then the final part would just be like getting more resources and directing folks to some of your books and the documentary push outs. But my last question is, I'm just imagining there might be some young people who are listening to this or watching it, or parental figures, and maybe they're feeling discouraged, maybe they're feeling targeted, and they come to you and they're listening to this. What words do you have directly to those youth who do feel pushed out, who may be listening and maybe a little frustrated and discouraged by education, society, the police? What words would you share with them?
To the young people feeling pushed out, but feeling not supported in the school system or in our communities, I say, hang in there. You're unstoppable. And one day, you'll look back and be like, oh, that was me. I was that kid that didn't feel like I belonged, or didn't feel like I was, an academic kid, or that school wasn't for me. And all of a sudden, you have a future where you're successful, where you become a professional and you get an education. But the way that you have to do this, young people, is to believe in yourself. Because when you believe in yourself, you accomplish the unbelievable. So you got to be your number one fan, telling yourself, you got this. Especially those of you that come from communities that are struggling, look around you. Do your neighbors struggle? Do your family struggle? And if the answer is yes, then you have an obligation, and that's always to give back, to get yourself an education, not just for yourself, not so you can make money for yourself, but rather you get yourself an education so you can help your family, you can help your community, and then of course along the way you also make a financial gain. But that's just the side, icing on the cake, right? The cake that you're baking is to be able to support your family and your community in a transformation process, right? Because if your communities are struggling, we need you. We need your leadership in those communities.
Wow, I just so appreciate your time, Dr. Rios. And like I said at the beginning, you don't even know the ripple effects of your story and your work has, reached probably farther than you've imagined. Because I know a lot of people who've known of you and have been inspired. So I just again appreciate you taking the time. And I hope for everyone listening or watching, this inspires some conversations. It inspires some change. It inspires some working to create that youth support complex that, our youth deserve. And I think we could work on it together. The very last bit is I was just gonna, share or ask if you have any suggestion of books or resources. I know we were talking today about the book in your background and book in my hand, Punished. That was what we talked about in our book club. I know I've also personally read Human Targets, and then I've given away all my copies of Street Life because that one's been a very impactful story for myself as well as some of the young people I work with. So you got it right there. Um, Dr. Rios, do you have any other resources or book suggestions? I know you mentioned the documentary Push Out that we'll link to this as well.
Yeah.
I think seeing it in person or through video, I think that could be inspiring.
For educators, check out my website, drvictorrios.com or scholarsystem.org. We got a network of amazing educators, principals, teachers that are doing this kind of work and coming up with a program to develop for various schools and school districts to utilize in terms of working with I Promise young people and changing the narrative, being asset based and embracing familial culture, just knowing how to educate the children we work with. So we've been working on that project for a while. Check us out, scholarsystem.org. And then also my book, My Teacher Believes in Me. And it's actually my wife and I wrote the book. We've been married 20 years. 20 years ago, I was a counselor. She was a middle school teacher at the same school. And the at promise kids we work with, the ones that would ditch school and I would have to go find them and bring them back to school. They set us up on our first date and hey, look, we're still at it.
Oh, wow. What a great story. And again, reach out to any of us. And here at A Seat at the Table Books, we'll always be repping Dr. Rios because you're such an inspiration. And I think the work you're doing is changing lives and we want to keep the momentum going. So thank you again for your time, Dr. Rios.
Thank you for your work. Take care, everyone. Peace.